Welcome to the Girl Crush podcast with Donna Pesci. Today I have the pleasure of speaking with Lijana Wallenda. If her name sounds familiar, it's because she's part of the famous Wallenda family, or the Flying Wallendas, one of the most well-known names in circus history. Throughout 8 generations, this family has entertained and amazed audiences with their artistry and talent, including high wire walking and the famous 7-person pyramid. On this episode, we dive into what it was like growing up as part of this famous family and the devastating, almost fatal accident that she suffered while practicing the high wire pyramid. Liana's story is one of tremendous resilience. I was inspired by her story, and I think you will be too. Hi, Lijana, and thank you so much for being here on the Girl Crush podcast today.
Hey, thanks for having me.
I am so excited to talk to you. I have wanted to talk to you for so long, so I'm so excited that we're finally getting to kind of sit down and talk. Let's just get right into it because you just have such an interesting story, and I think it all kind of starts with your family history. The Flying Wallendas, which many people I'm sure have heard of and know about. But I'd love to kind of hear it from your perspective and your point of view and kind of how it all started, because this, from my understanding, started like in the early 1900s. Is that the case?
The 1780s is when our family started in circuses. Yes, I am. I'm 7 generations in the circus business. So since the 1780s, my family's performed everything from flying trapeze to trained sea lions. You know, they've done a little bit of everything in the circus. But what my family's really known for is high wire walking. And that started 4 generations ago with my great grandfather, Carl Wallenda. So that was in the early 1900s that started.
And is that where the Flying Wallendas actually started?
Yeah, is that the name of the name that a newspaper reporter gave them at some point? It was just the Wallenda family, back in the day. So yeah. So in the early 1900s, my great grandfather, he was a hand balancer. He would do handstands on just about anything. He was a very good hand balancer, and he was performing, I believe, in a beer garden in Germany, doing handstands. And that contract was about to be up. And in the past, him and his family would have to go work in the coal mines in between contracts just to get dinner on the table. And he was not happy about that. He didn't like that. So he happened to be looking through like these classified ads in the back of some publication and saw an ad from a high wire troupe looking for a hand balancer. So he answered the ad and got the job, and the rest is history.
And so then he wound up creating a family of high wire acts and acrobats and all of that, correct?
Yes, he fell so in love with it that he eventually trained his own family members, had his own high wire troupe, and he was very innovative. He was always creating new one-of-a-kind tricks on the high wire that the world hadn't seen before. So he most famously, he created the 7-person pyramid on the high wire, which is stacking 7 people up on the high wire, and was known around the world for that.
Yeah, which is really amazing, to have a talent like that and then turn it into something that continues for however many generations, it's been. I mean, that's really so interesting. So what was your childhood like?
Yes, I grew up traveling the country with my mom, my dad, my brother, and our dogs in an Airstream trailer. My parents would perform, they performed in every big city, pretty much every little city in the country, in different circuses and events. So I grew up traveling with them, and I'd always done little things in the circus, nothing too serious. I would like put on a pretty costume and be in the opening parade. My brother was a clown when he was little. I would do like smaller aerial feats when I was 5 years old. I started doing that. But I didn't start performing on the high wire till I was 13, till I was old enough to come to my parents and ask them. They wanted to be my desire. So I asked them if I could perform, but also old enough to know the danger, because there's no gimmicks up there. It's life or death. So I came to them when I was 13, asked them, if I could start performing with them. And they said, well, yeah, sure. Go out and practice. Cause we always had a low wire in our backyard. So I went out for a couple weeks practicing and they saw I was serious. And then they came out and started training me and started performing later that year.
That's so interesting because I think sometimes when people are brought up in a family business, they're not necessarily given a choice. And you would think something like this, it would be like, this is what you're going to do.
Yeah.
So I think it's a great credit to your parents that they kind of waited and wanted it to be something that you actually wanted to do.
Yes. Yes.
So I think that's great. So you were 13, and then how long was it before you were actually performing in actual shows?
Well, the end of the year, I started, I
Oh,
started
wow.
out doing something very, very small in the wire act because I could walk a wire since I can't remember not walking a wire because there was always a low one around. So I could already walk the wire when I came to them and wanted to perform. They just wanted me
Sure.
to train and train and train. You have to have that extra strength, that extra, you know, stability on the wire. So I started with like the easiest feat, not doing a whole lot up there, and then slowly over the years progressed to doing more and more tricks in the act.
Got it. And then, so were you homeschooled because you were traveling so much, or were you in one place long enough to actually go to school?
Yeah, so our house it still is in Sarasota, Florida, and that was like where we'd be during the winter and when we weren't performing. So there was a private school there that my parents would send my brother and I to, but then we would take the same curriculum with us and they would homeschool us on the road. So then when we came back home, we'd fit right back in with the rest of the classmates, and so that worked well for us. So a little bit of both, homeschooling and regular school life.
Sure, which was probably great because what better education than traveling around and seeing
Yeah.
the world and meeting what I'm sure was, really interesting people from all different walks of life, I'm sure.
So I performed with my family up until I got married, moved to Chicago, and performed there as well. So,
Yeah, and I want to talk about that because I saw you perform in a
mhm.
show in Chicago. And it was really something different than anything I've ever seen. And I think I've seen a lot in the entertainment industry. And I will always remember it because I think I went into that show kind of not really knowing what I was about to see.
Uh-huh.
And, knowing that there was going to be high wire, walking. But I had no idea that, I was about to kind of be like blown away by this
Oh, wow.
talent and also story and artistry. And I just like really never forgot it because I was so kind of really blown away by it. But um so that show was obviously a little bit later.
Mhm.
So by that time, had you kind of turned this into you had turned this into kind of a different kind of career. You weren't necessarily performing in a circus.
Correct.
So tell me the evolution of that
Yeah.
turn of events there.
Yeah, look, it all happened organically. It to me, I eat, sleep, and breathe walking the wire. It's weird, but it truly is my passion. Performing different aerial stuff, but the high wire is really my passion. So I've never, in any point, thought, "Oh, I'm not a performer. I'm not a high wire walker anymore." I still to this day, I'm like, people ask me what I do. I have a costume designing job here in Vegas, but my first answer is I'm a high wire walker because that's just who I am, right? Um, so yeah, when I moved to Chicago, we eventually had an entertainment company. My ex-husband and I at the time we had an entertainment company, and that was always kind of that was my passion. That was where I was really living. The rest was just, working to get by to make ends meet. Um
Sure.
so I never think that I've paused performing because I really haven't. I know it's not steady. It's not in the circus traveling all the time. It's different than that, but I still found a way to perform and, earn much of my living from that. So,
Yeah, I'm going to put, for people that are listening to this and not watching it, definitely go and watch it because I'm going to put some of the, the clips of these shows up because I think that people really need to kind of see it to, to understand. So, and speaking of costume designing, I remember the costumes were amazing as
yeah,
well.
thanks.
Um, did you pick up some of that just from the, costume design from doing that?
So I grew up, my parents always designed and made all of our costumes. So I grew up seeing my mom sew and my dad kind of design them, would help trim them out and stuff. And I just kind of learned through life with my family. And then when I moved to Chicago, it was natural that I was making all my own costumes for performing. And we worked a lot. Well, my then sister-in-law, she's a company member of Looking Glass Theater Company in Chicago, and then my then husband also would work with them a lot. So I ended up co-designing some shows for them, Hephaestus, and I designed Hephaestus. I had a small part in co-designing Looking Glass Alice. I designed some stuff for the Actors Gymnasium that was in Chicago, and so it just sort of progressed from there, where I just kept doing stuff for more people outside of just me and my family's costumes.
Sure.
So yeah, it just kind of kept building on that. So performing is always going to be my first love. It just is. But
Sure.
I would say the second would be costume design. I do love that. So yeah, it is another passion. But if it's like costume design or performing, it's always going to be performing.
Sure. Sure. I mean, that's great that you get to do, both of those
Well,
things.
it's great. I have well, he's almost 13. I have a son. I can't be traveling so much. So it's great that I have that, and it allows me time to, be home with him and raise him and stuff. If I was performing every night in a show, it would be a babysitter raising him, and I decided I didn't want that. So that's why the costume designing is great. It's a real blessing.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So you have this kind of amazing, unique career your whole life, and you're doing these high wire walks and stunts, and some of them were pretty intense. But there came a time when you had a fall.
Yes.
And if you don't mind, would love to, if you would kind of take us through that, because from what I remember and what I, understand of it, it was almost a fatal
Yes.
situation.
Yes. Yeah. So I was here in Vegas, at that time I was incredibly busy here. I was performing in a show here doing high wire. I was also the coach and had trained the other men that were performing with me. I was training a new man to join the act, and I was the resident costume designer for the show. Single mom to a 5-year little boy. So I was crazy busy. And my brother called me and said, "Hey, me and my troupe are about to do the 8-person pyramid on the high wire. It's going to be a world record." Now, this is a world record I held in Guinness Book World. I still hold the Guinness Book World Record for the 4-level 8-person pyramid on the high wire. We broke that record in Karashiki, Japan in 2001. So
Wow.
when my brother called me, of course, yes, I want to do this. And I told you, it's my passion, performing. So I worked it out with work here that I could take time off, and I went down to Florida and trained, and it was the time came to do one of the final rehearsals before the show was to open. And so we were up at full height in the tent where we were to perform this feat. And I remember walking out. I was on the second level in the front of this 4-level pyramid. And I remember the pyramid walking out, and I remember it feeling really good and solid. And I even said out loud, "Guys, this feels great." And then I was hit with this jolt like nothing I'd ever felt in my life on the wire. And all my 4 decades, almost 4 decades of wire walking, it was just this crazy jolt that I don't, to this day, we don't know what happened. And I remember falling back on my training. You're meant to stay very solid in your body because you got someone below you. So if I'm moving my feet, I'm going to knock them. And I got someone above me attached to the bar on my shoulder, standing on the bar on my shoulders. So if I move my shoulders, I'm going to knock them. So I remember trying to stay as solid as I could. And you just use your balancing pole to keep you steady on the wire. And I remember
So before you go, I'm sorry to interrupt you. So to set the scene of this, there's one person as the base. Is that true?
So no, to set the scene, there are 4 men on the bottom level standing on the wire. The front 2 have a bar between their shoulders, and the back 2 have a bar between their shoulders. Then on the second level, there was me. And then there was a man standing on the back, two men on that level. And then the two of us in the second level had a bar between our shoulders. And then there was one person standing on top to make up the third level. And then there was a person sitting on his shoulders to make up the fourth level. So
Amazing.
I
Okay. I
know
just wanted to have like,
it's hard to,
create that visual so that people can
yeah,
understand it.
yeah, it's kind of hard to imagine without seeing. But so I got this jolt like nothing I'd ever felt before. And I was trying to stay as solid as I could so that the people could be okay below me and above me. And I just remember my balancing pole going up and down and up. And then it went totally vertical and pulled me off the wire. And I was really cool and calm in that moment. I was like, okay, my parents had always trained my brother and I to catch the wire if we were to fall. So much so that if we were on a wire 3 feet off the ground, we weren't allowed to just step off and walk away. We had to step off and physically turn and grab the wire. So it was so in our mind and our body to grab the wire. So I was like, okay. So I looked for the wire. The wire was below me at that moment, but it was too far because I was on the second level and fell away. So I couldn't, there was no way I could reach the wire. And then I thought, okay, what do I do now? It was no fear in that moment. It was just like, there's that fight or flight. It was just the fight. Like, okay, what do I do now? And I remember thinking about my 5-year-old little boy and how I wanted to have my strong arm, my right arm and my right side of the body to pick him up and stuff. And I remember, I don't know why that came to my mind, but I remember thinking about trying to twist to the left. I don't know if that exactly happened, but I ended up, most of the injuries were on the left side of my body. So I think that I did actually accomplish that.
Wow.
And I remember seeing the red carpet, the red circular mat that was in the circus ring on the floor getting closer and closer and closer to my face until I smacked into it. I couldn't breathe. I never lost consciousness, but I couldn't breathe. And I was like, oh, okay. And I realized the wind is just knocked out of me. I tried to tell the man that was standing above me that was on the floor, I can't breathe. But you can't really get voice out at that moment. And I realized, oh, okay, the wind's knocked out of me. And so I kind of just let it be for a second. And then the air finally came back. I remember my brother being at my side almost instantly. He was on the pyramid with us. He was on the first level in the back. He was able to catch the wire. So he doesn't remember how he got down as fast as he could, but he somehow climbed his way down and was at my side almost instantly. And I kept trying to get up because I wanted to see. I was so worried about everyone else. We have a history in 1962. My family was doing the 7-person pyramid on the wire. So one level less than what we were doing. And it ended up collapsing. And in this particular accident, my grandmother was on the platform watching, and she watched her husband, who would have been my step grandfather, fall to his death right before her eyes.
Wow.
Uncle, I'd only known as a paralyzed man. He was 18. He was paralyzed from the waist down. A cousin fell to his death. So this has happened. So I thought it was fine though. So I kept trying to get up and checking everyone. And my brother's like, no, don't get up. Don't get up. What I didn't know is that he said my face was completely unrecognizable within a minute of the accident. Just swollen out to here. Said there was blood coming out of everything. It was bad.
Had you fallen direct? So you had a direct hit. Your face directly hit. You couldn't break your fall in any way.
Don't exactly know. Don't exactly know what happened, but it
Yeah.
seems maybe that way. It seems like I fell directly straight on my face, straight forward, which ended up being a blessing because it protected my brain. The bones protected my brain from getting, if I would have fallen to the side, the surgeon said there's a pretty good chance I'd have brain damage.
Wow.
It's all a miracle how it all went down. It's a tragedy, but it's all a miracle the way it went down. So yeah, I finally listened to my brother because he wouldn't let me get up, and waited in what seemed to be an eternity, for the ambulance to get there because the pain had really started to set in at that point. Just I don't even know how to describe it. Like pain everywhere, just terrible pain. I remember getting me on the gurney, getting me in the ambulance. My brother jumped in the ambulance in the front of the ambulance with me. I always get emotional this part. I remember him yelling. I could hear him saying, "Dad, we're going to such and such hospital." So I knew my dad had arrived, and I remember being so worried for my family because that's, I'm fine. I know I'm fine, right? Or
Yeah.
so I thought. um, and remember getting to the hospital, and that's when I kind of things get a little blurry because then they put me in a medically induced coma. They had done several surgeries over the 4 days until I kind of remember again. Um, my injuries were I had broken my left calcaneus, which is a bone in your heel, which is a really important bone. it's so that was the first surgery they did. I guess the bone was tenting out the skin, so they had to do that. Then I believe the next day they did surgery on my arm because I broke my humerus, the bone that goes like this. I clear through a break, so I still have a big long plate and 9 screws in there. Um, then I think the day after that, I didn't have a surgery, but I did celebrate my 40th birthday in the trauma unit. So that was,
Wow.
I don't remember much of it, but yeah. Um,
Ugh.
yeah. And then the next day they did surgery on my face because I had broken every single bone in my face.
Oh my gosh.
Not just a couple, everything from here and down was all broken. So yeah, I had broken my left calcaneus in my heel, my left humerus in my arm, broke some ribs, lacerated my liver, punctured my right ear canal, and broke every single bone in my face. But
Wow.
I don't remember them telling me all the stuff that they had done over those days. It was all just a blur. But the first time I really remember in the hospital is I woke up in the middle of the night. It's probably 2, 3 in the morning. And I saw my mom there, and then a good friend of mine was there. And I was like, I'm not breathing. I'm not breathing. And I remember going, Mom. And she didn't react. And I realized you're not hearing my voice. There's no sound coming out. And I was like, Mom, Mom. And I started hitting on the bed, hitting on the bed. And at that point, they just were ignoring me. They didn't know what was going on. And at that point was the one point that I was scared. That moment I was like, I'm dying. I'm not breathing. And for some reason, it's like some horror movie you wake up in, no one's listening to me. So I just started praying because I was like, okay, I'm dying right now. But I didn't realize that I had a trach tube, a feeding tube, and my jaw wired shut. Didn't know any of that happened. So when you have a trach tube, you can see the scar right there. There's this opening in your neck, so your voice you can't talk. That
Right.
doesn't come up and talk, doesn't come up and make sound. So that was pretty traumatic. But I eventually realized, okay, I'm okay. It was a hard thing to get used to. I remember the days following. I remember my dad being there, and I would always tap him on the arm and have him look at my oxygen levels because it just doesn't, it's the weirdest feeling. Your lungs just don't seem to expand in the same way. You don't feel that air passing through your throat like you're used to. So it was scary for a while, but I eventually got used to it. So yeah.
There's so many things about that. It sounds utterly terrifying. To not only the fall, which I want to go back to that a little bit because it's so crazy to me that you had the thoughts in your mind to think about, I want to be able to pick up my son,
Yeah.
and that's kind of where your brain goes. And it's
Yeah.
fascinating to me that's what you were worried about. Of course, it's your son, but I mean, it's really amazing that those were your thoughts as this was happening. And also, I think it's very, I don't know, courageous and brave that you were thinking this whole time about how is everyone else, and oh my gosh, my dad's going to see me like this, and is he going to be okay
Yeah.
seeing me like this? And I think it's a thing that women tend to do is, we're fine, we're fine, we're fine. Like, how is
Yeah.
everybody else around us?
Yeah.
And wow, that is just kind of mind blowing. But so you had broken all of the bones in your face. You are in the hospital now, surgery after surgery. How long was your hospital stay?
So I was in the trauma unit, and they thought first I'd be there for like 3 months.
Wow.
Um, but as I was in the trauma unit, I was like, okay, what do I do? I got to keep as much strength as I can because I have this little boy. I have stuff I have to do in my life. So I would lay in my bed with a big cast on my left leg, with a bunch of staples and wrapping on my arm, with this trach tube, this feeding tube, my jaw wired shut, and I would do crunches, mini crunches.
Oh my
Because I didn't
god.
know the strength I had. I would stand on my one good leg and do like they weren't deep, but like mini squats with the one good leg because I had to keep up the
Wow.
strength so I could recover. So they'd come back and be like, well, maybe only like 2 months, 6 weeks. And then they come back and see my mom and my dad and my brother and my sister-in-law and all my supportive family there for me that were so supportive. And the support of my family, along with my determination, um, kind of convinced them that, and I was out in 10 or 11 days, which
Wow.
they thought was crazy. They said that's not, going to happen at the beginning, but then they got to know me and my family more and realized now if it wasn't for my parents, this took place in my hometown. So my parents, were there and I went home to their house and I had to rely on them heavily. They had to feed me through a tube in my stomach for quite a while. I couldn't do
Wow.
anything on my own, for a little while. So thank God for them. I couldn't have gone home on my own. I needed them
Sure.
as well. So yeah, very thankful.
Well, yeah, I mean, thank God that you have such a supportive family, and I do think that that makes a difference in any type of crisis.
Yeah,
Obviously, if you have people around you that are there, to support you.
yes.
Um, so, how long was it that? I mean, I guess your recovery is
My recovery.
got to be
Yes. Yeah. So
forever, right?
I got out of the hospital and I can't remember if it was 10 or 11 days, but somewhere around there. Um, but I had to stay in Florida with my family for 2.5 months before the doctors would release me to come back to Vegas and kind of start to get back to some semblance of my life. So yeah, I was down there for a while, went through lots of things where they finally unwired my jaw. They finally, I could tell you a lot of not pleasant stories through that. Um, but I did 2.5 months later, came back, had to buy a house and move shortly after because the place I was renting, the man kept calling me going, we want to move it. You have to get out. And I was like, I
Oh
can't
my gosh.
talk right now.
Oh my
Kind of
God.
way. Like it was like all the stressors. So, but miraculously, only by the grace of God, I was able to come back and find a house and buy a house and with lots of help move. Again, none of this was on my own. It was all with lots of help and support, but move. Um, I had to go back down to Florida later that year because my left foot was just I would like drag it behind me when I finally was able to put weight on it. It was in so much pain. So I ended up having all the hardware removed from there when I was able to, and that helped somewhat. Um, I had I had to have a plate in my face kind of removed because I had to get braces. I had knocked out teeth. I had sheared teeth in half. I mean, I had so much work done over the time. So I went back to Florida for those two surgeries. Um, I found another face surgeon because the way they kind of put my face back together, my lower jaw was a little bit back into the side, so my teeth weren't matching up. It wasn't super noticeable from the outside, but it was your teeth with your bite doesn't match up.
Mm.
Really function real well that way. So in let's see, it was November of 2018. I went back down to Florida to this new face surgeon I found and I had a 9-hour surgery and they re-broke everything. They had to re-break it and put it all back together.
Oh,
And that was
wow.
like I had taken all these steps forward and it was like I slid all the way back. It felt like that surgery was really hard. The
Wow.
recovery was incredibly hard. It was to me, it was harder than the accident. And I think it's probably because I was a little bit more aware of things, but I'll tell you, it was
Sure.
really hard. And then my face is all swollen out again and I look like a monster again. And, it was really tough. Um, but I got through it and was able to come back to Vegas and continue on, with my job here and raising my boy and all that.
Well,
Mm.
it's amazing looking at you, because you would never think, looking at you now, that you had broken all of those bones. You're beautiful, and were then and are now. But wow, to kind of have to go through that is just got to be so terrifying. So the physical was obviously just amazing that you were able to get through all of the physical stuff. But I imagine that the emotional side of it, or the mental side of it, is a huge thing too, and doesn't necessarily heal as quickly as bones and things like that. So what was that like for you?
Yeah, there's a couple things I can comment on that. One, after the accident, when I had come home to my parents' house, my face was a mess. I didn't look like myself. I was very swollen. I mean, it took years for the swelling to go down, and looking in the mirror was really hard. It's really hard.
I
But I had
bet.
decided early on that I had to focus on one good thing. I would not fixate on the whole picture. I couldn't look at the whole picture because that was too much. That was too overwhelming. So, oh, my dimple's back. That's amazing. Like, I'd focus on little things and try to just be thankful for that. And that really helped me. I think it's such a analogy for life too. If you're looking at the whole crazy picture of what's going on in your life, it's too much. And sometimes I think we need to step back and just pick one piece we can work on this week, or whatever that might be. But it was really, for me, that was really helpful to choose to focus on one good thing.
I
Even though
love that. Oh my
I
gosh.
maybe saw the bad stuff too, but I was like, nope, that's okay. Nope, I'm going to focus on the good thing. It's still there. You still see it, but you got to be thankful for the good thing. So that's what helped get me through. Um, and then, you know, I I thought it was fine, as far as walking the wire. I got back on a low wire in my parents' backyard as soon as I was allowed to put weight on that foot again. I think it was a 6-week non-weight bearing thing. Um, so I got back on the low wire, just doing a little walking, nothing, no tricks or anything, but I was fine. And then I came back to Vegas, and I wasn't in the high wire act in Vegas anymore, but I was training. I was still the coach, so I would get up on the wire when we were training, and I would do pyramids with them and stuff. But that wire, this particular show, the wire is pretty low. It's only 8 feet off the ground, which, because it's a small tent, which for us is like no height, but I was fine. And so my brother had called me, and he had asked me if I wanted to join him. He had said, so my brother's done many specials on TV. He's walked across the Grand Canyon. He's walked across Niagara Falls. Um, all live televised performances. He has an Emmy for one of them. Like, he's really been successful in that. So he called me, I think it was January of 2019. So not so far after my face surgery. That was 2018 in November. But he had called me, and he was like, "Hey, I was just in New York doing a site survey at Times Square." He said, I'm going to do a special on ABC, and I'm going to walk across Times Square." And I was like, "Oh, that's awesome. I'll be there." Right. I always go to support him. And he said, "Hey, do you think you want to do it with me?" And I was
Wow.
like, but that kind of hesitancy went away really fast, because, like I said, that's my passion, performing, wire walking. And I said, "Yes, of course. Yeah, absolutely." So
Wow.
I was super excited, and we worked out all the stuff here in Vegas at the work, and I was able to go down to Florida to train with my brother. And I was about to take my first step on a wire that was any bit of height since I'd been on the accident. It was 15 foot high, so not super high in our world, but when you're up there looking down, it still looks pretty high.
Absolutely.
So I step out on this wire thinking I'm fine, and all of a sudden I saw that big round mat that I saw racing towards my face as I was falling. I could see that image every step I took. I see it as I'm talking to you. I have this photographic memory, and um I just kept dealing with that. And so that PTSD that I had no idea I had, it hit me like a ton of bricks. So I'd be like, no, I'm fine. I'm going to keep going. I'm going to keep practicing. Tomorrow will be better. And I'd come back the next day and I was absolutely terrified. I just keep remembering that feeling of falling, the ground getting closer and closer to my face. But I was like, no, I said I would do this. I have to do this. But I didn't want to at that moment. I did. It's the first time in my life I didn't want to perform. Um, but I kept pushing through and pushing through. And it was terrifying for, I think, about 6 weeks. I was walking the wire very rigid and stiff and not enjoying it like I always had in the past. And so we had moved to a higher wire for our second kind of level of training. This wire was 50 foot in the air, 500 feet across. And I would do laps back and forth. And the whole time, like really rigid and in my own head about it. And on this one particular walk, I was walking and I started thinking about something random. I don't know. What am I going to have for lunch? Something like that. And then I was like, I'm not terrified right now. And I just remember that moment. I was like, I remember now. I remembered the way I love the weight of the balancing pole in my hand. And I love the way the wire feels sliding across my feet. And I had started to believe the lies in my head saying, you're not good enough. Why are you doing this? Like, what, you should be afraid. Why, who do you think you are? You fell. But in that moment, I had remembered how much I love this. And it was such a raw, real moment. I made my way into the platform and tears were streaming down my face because it was such an emotional, like, I remembered how much I love this. And
Wow.
the rigger there asked me, he's like, what's wrong? And I just blurted out, I forgot who I was. I have no idea where that came from.
Oh
It
my God.
was such a like a big moment in my recovery. Because I didn't think it all through that what I forgot, but I forgot who I was. I come from a long line of very good wire walkers. I'm a very good wire walker, but I started to believe those lies in my own mind. So that was the breakthrough. And that was the moment that I knew I was ready for Times Square, to walk across Times Square. So
That's
yeah.
unbelievable. For you to be, well, first of all, let's just go back to your brother calling you and saying, hey,
Yeah.
do you want to do this? Like
Yeah.
that all just falls apart for me right there. I'm like, wait, what?
Yeah.
So there was no hesitation. I mean, I think, all of this is really just so inspiring and unbelievable. But, people say, it's in my blood. People use that like expression all the time when they
Mhm.
continue in something that their family's done. But this must truly be in your blood, because I can't imagine going through what you went through and then even ever wanting to do it again. And I think the resilience that it takes to say, of course I'm going to do this again, and to go and have that that PTSD, and to really see that, because sometimes people have accidents and they don't remember it at all. You have
Yeah.
a very clear memory of what feels like every step of that accident happening,
Yeah.
and most of what happened after.
Mhm.
So to have that, like you said, as like a photographic memory, and to be up there doing it, and then to continue to go for weeks and make yourself kind of do that.
Yeah.
I don't know if there's a word for that, but it's inspiring. Doesn't seem to really cut it. I don't think I would be able to do that. I don't think I would even attempt it. I think I would be hanging up on my brother when he would be asking and calling me. I would be like, not even answering that. I'm not even answering it. But it's amazing. It's amazing to me. And I don't want to, I want to go back for a minute about what you said, because I think it's really important. The fact that you focused on one good thing, and just that one thing.
Yeah.
And the analogy that you made, that, I think people can kind of take that through to
Yeah.
anything that
Yeah.
you do, in your life. And for you, it was such a such a major thing. And I really want to like applaud you for doing that, because I think anybody that is in that situation, most people would have definitely been okay with a little bit of feeling sorry for themselves, or saying, oh my God, and not even feeling sorry for yourself, but just really looking at the gravity of the situation and just, saying like being afraid, being
Yeah.
afraid.
Yeah.
You had every right to just be afraid, to look in the mirror and know that all of the bones in your face had been broken and that you have metal plates and all of that. You had every right to kind of be afraid, and you chose to not be afraid.
Yeah.
So I think that's really remarkable and amazing.
But I think it happens to all of us. We don't all fall off a wire. People have different wires. Whether it's going through a divorce or losing a job. All of these kind of traumas kind of strip pieces of us away, pieces of our confidence, pieces of, kind of who we are. And it's really easy to forget who you are, to forget how powerful, how strong you can be when you need to be. Um, if I did go back to walking the wire, yeah, like you said, it'd be perfectly fine. Everyone would accept that. But what a tragedy that would be in and of itself, because that is my passion. What a tragedy if I never remembered that part of me and I never accessed that part of me again. I'd be fine. I'd be living my life and everything would be fine. But I think I know I'd always be missing that. So I think it's so applicable to people in every walk of life because, maybe you lost your job and it really, hurts your ego, your self-esteem. But if you let that affect you and not go for the next job because you think, I don't want that to happen again. What a tragedy that is for that person. I think that all of us have these hard things and we forget kind of who we are. We forget what we're capable of. I think it's super important to push through even those hard times, dig deep, remember who you are. When I was a big swollen face, what I felt like looked like a monster, turned 40 in the trauma unit, single mom turning 40. That was tough. You have to dig deep in those moments to remember, wait a minute, my value to this world has nothing to do with how pretty I look or, how high of a wire I can walk. None of that matters. I'm not put in this earth just for that. My value is far exceeds that. So I think that all of that is just so applicable to everybody in every walk of life, not just, performers or wire walkers or daredevils, So
Absolutely. What an amazing lesson for all of us and anyone that is really listening, because like you said, we're not going to be on that, walking a high wire. We're not necessarily taking our lives into our hands, but we have these things that we're afraid of.
yeah,
And to be able to kind of conquer a fear in that way, to hear that you have done it in such a big, huge way, I think is really going to be inspiring to people that are maybe just trying to tackle their own fears, however big or small they might be. So thank you for that. But back to Times Square, and take us through that. Take us through Times Square, because I've watched it, and I'm going to try to put something on this so that people can see it. But I would encourage people to, I think I found it on YouTube, and I would definitely encourage people to watch it. But yeah, take us through that day.
Yeah. So that day, starting in the morning of, I ended up my mom and sister-in-law and I had to run all around New York City because I had to change my costume up last minute. So we had to go and search for like materials for it and stuff. So I really overdid it on that left foot where I had that broken calcaneus. That's the injury that they say you're going to always kind of live with. So my foot was swollen and it was really hurting. So there was that. But I was like, okay, it's fine. And I didn't look off the edge of the building until right before the walk. My brother thought I shouldn't because he didn't want it in my head. And I thought, well, he's probably right. So I didn't look off the edge until right before I had to step on the wire. And when you're
Oh,
standing 25 stories up, looking down across, the vast, expanse, all the flashing lights from Times Square, the people down below that look like ants. I don't care how much you've trained. I don't care what you've done your whole life. That's still scary.
absolutely. So the wire is between two buildings in Times Square.
Yes, I started
Okay.
on the side. Do you know where the ball drops every New Year's Eve in Times
Yeah.
Square? That's right there is where I started my walk.
Okay.
Um, so I was starting on one end, my brother started on the other end, and we met in the middle. But yeah, so I'm staying there, waiting to take that first step out, and it's really scary. And for a second, you're like, what am I doing? Why did I agree to that? But you remember all your hard training. You remember, that your whole life has led you to this moment. And I had to think and remember that I would do the length of the walk 3 times in practice. So I had 3 times the strength I needed. I had to sit down and stand up in the middle of the wire. And I was a little nervous about that part, but I did it 25 times in a row the day that we left for Times Square back home. So I was ready.
Yeah.
So you have to fall back in your training. It's about having a mental strength more than physical strength in that moment. It's mind over matter. So I had to remember, nope, this is terrifying looking, but I know what I'm doing. I am so qualified for this. And so you take that first step, and it's still really scary. But 10 steps in, it's still scary, but it's a little less scary. And you keep taking those steps till finally you remember that this is living, this is life for me, this is what I love. And what an experience, seeing all those flashing lights. Nobody will ever have the same view my brother and I had. Like, that was an incredible view. The people below, like looking like ants below us.
Wow.
I think there was like 200,000 people that came out to cheer us on, just to cheer us on. It was amazing. And the biggest experience is that I conquered that fear. I didn't let that fear define me. I didn't let that trauma from the accident define me and that fear define me. I pushed through. Like I had said, it would have been really easy to just say, "Nah, I'm done. Hang up my wire shoes, be done." That would have been okay. But I am so glad that I pushed through and did find that strength deep within me. And my strength in God. That's what really got me through. So
Yeah. Amazing. Amazing. So that walk was not just, walking from one end to the other. I want to just make that clear to the people that are listening, because in the middle, you started off on opposite ends, and in the middle, you actually had to kind of bend
I
down a
was
little bit, almost did a split.
Actually, I was sitting on the wire. I had to sit.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then your brother stepped over you.
Correct.
And then you had to stand back up
Yes.
while on the wire and
Yeah.
continue to walk,
Yeah.
which is just, you have to watch it if you it's amazing and terrifying to watch. So I can't even imagine. But wow, to know and to be able to say to yourself, like, this is who I am, that's got to feel so incredible, to know that you can do something like that.
I mean, it's life. I saw my parents do it ever since I was in a little stroller. I'd watch them perform, right? So to me, it's pretty normal. But the fact that I was able to, push through that fear, push past the pain and the fear and the stress of it, and do it, that was a really great feeling. So yeah, that was great. And to show
So
my son
unbelievable.
too. Show my son and the world. Like, don't give in to those fears. I'm not saying everyone should jump up and walk a wire across Times Square. Don't get me wrong, But whatever that fear is in your life, whatever that wire to get across in your life is, keep pushing,
Yeah.
going. You can do it. If you can do it down low, you can do it up high. And that, again, if you can, whatever, deliver a speech, in front of the mirror, you can kill it in a boardroom. It's all possible. You just it's about your mind, about pushing through and believing in yourself.
That's true. That's true. I did want to ask about your son, because he was how old when you had your
He was 5
fall?
years old when I had
Wow.
the accident. Yeah.
So he is old enough to have seen, you kind of work through this and come out on the other end and see you, perform and walk a wire through Times Square. Like, that's got to be, I don't know if he knows it now, but that's got to really teach him some amazing lessons that he really has a badass for a mom at the very least.
It's sort of like I said, I'd always grown up seeing my parents walk the wire, so it's normal. To him, it's sort of normal. He doesn't quite get it right now. Maybe when he's older, he'll look back and say, "Oh, wow." But to him, it's just life. That's all he's ever known,
Yeah.
So it's kind of
And
funny.
does he walk the wires? Is he doing that too?
He can walk the wire, the low one in the backyard. during when we were all quarantined, he really became a good wire walker. He really started to like walking the wire. He would go out back and do laps back and forth. Now he's 12 and he's like, I don't want to do that, Mom. So we'll see if he wants to pick it back up when he's a little older. But yeah, he hasn't walked the wire in a little while, but he can do it. He does know how to walk the wires. So yeah.
So what's next for you?
Yeah, I got a couple of performances that I'm trying to get done. I'm working on a book.
Amazing. I was going to say, you should be writing a book.
Yeah, I'm working on a book. So there's that. And then I also, do like inspirational keynote speaking to people because, I went through so much and I don't want to just keep that all to myself. I feel like the world needs to know if this will inspire someone, I want to share it.
Thank you for doing all of that. That is amazing. I can't imagine anybody being more inspiring, and hearing your story has just like really kind of made me emotional, just kind of hearing it and going through it with you. So I want to thank you for sharing your story and your emotions and your way of thinking, your courage in the face of this, and your resilience, because I don't know, I know that people that are listening are gonna think about that, and hopefully think about that in their own lives when they're facing something that's a challenge.
Yeah.
So it was really inspiring to hear your story, and I really want to thank you for being here and telling it to me.
Well, thanks for having me.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Girl Crush podcast. Be sure to check out the show notes for more information on this episode and my guest. If you're enjoying this podcast, please hit the subscribe button. You can also leave me a comment about the episode. I create this show for you, and I would love to hear your feedback. Also, be sure to follow us on Instagram and TikTok for more information on upcoming topics, guests, and some other fun content. Thanks again for being here.